With 2 extensive reviews of other strange LEGO handheld games under my belt, I figured it was only in fashion to go back to the pre-Traveler's Tales era, where LEGO games were handled by a multitude of different developers and studios. They also tended to focus more on LEGO's core themes, stuff like pirates, Knight's Kingdom, town, etc. There were management sims, RTS games, exploration games, as well as, important to today's video, racing games. Now, most people are familiar with the LEGO Racers series, particularly the first one. Developed by High Voltage Studios and released on PC, Nintendo 64, and PlayStation, LEGO Racers was a kart-style racing game with a focus on customization. Releasing to mostly positive reviews in 1999, the game touted various innovations that really pushed the boundary for the time. A large emphasis and a large chunk of the game's development focused on the ability for players to build a car from a library of LEGO bricks, that not only changed how the car would look, but also its actual statistics depending on the volume and amount of bricks attached. Additionally, the player could customize their character from a library of pre-existing minifigure parts, and then actually play as that character in-game. Over a variety of different worlds, players would progress through a set of circuits until they eventually beat out LEGO racing champion Rocket Racer. While the game borrows a majority of its mechanics from rival games in the genre such as Mario Kart or Crash Team Racing, it definitely had a lot of its own unique ideas that set it apart from the competition. Particularly of note is how the game uses power-ups, in which players would make a choice of different colored pickups, and then be able to level up the attack by collecting white power plus bricks that would increase the capability of whatever power-up the player has stored. Additionally, tracks are a little more involved than in other races, as shortcuts and alternate routes usually have destructible barriers that need to be blown away by a power-up. Personally, I think there's a lot of potential in LEGO Racers' design template and mechanics, and I think even modern races like Mario Kart 8 could stand to learn a lot from them. In particular, the way that power-ups are chosen, stocked, and then used is a lot more strategic and far more reliable than the random item boxes in Mario Kart. Getting a good item means being more conservative with your use and playing it smart rather than just getting lucky. So, with such a specific and advanced for the time feature set, you'd be surprised to learn that a portable version of this game would come out on the Game Boy Color. Developed by Climax Studios, the GBC version has some pretty daunting tasks to fill for such a ludicrously underpowered system compared to its counterparts. 3D races was something that would be a challenge to produce on the successor, the Game Boy Advance, which at least had the advantage of Mode 7 processing. And yet, to my shock and awe, the Game Boy Color version set out to not only retain a 3D point of view, but also the game's customization features and power-up system too. How successful is it at condensing the LEGO Racers experience? Let's find out! First off, I want to point out that attention to detail is extremely on the mark. Not only has the original game's soundtrack made the conversion in the form of the poppy crunch soundscape you'd expect from a keygen, but the font has been converted to pixel format, and overall the experience feels immediately recognizable, with its electric blue stud background and bold yellow menu. First off, we've got to make a racer, and lo and behold, we get to completely build our character. While obviously not as important for this version and doesn't have as wide a library, it's still nice to have a custom save file icon and license when we're done. Next comes the car, and I'll be shocked if this isn't actually very impressive. Handheld gamers spoiled with more modern systems will probably scoff at my assessment, but in this era, having more than one vehicle available at any time was a luxury, let alone one you get to customize. There's only 3 bricks to choose from for 3 different positions and 2 tire set types, and a small selection of colors, which is an absolutely paltry offering compared to the original game. But the existence and sheer novelty to affect any of the in-game assets, and have it be stored in the game's memory is purely gobsmacking for a GBC game. Remember, this was an era where saving your game was considered a feature. Actually jumping into the game then with our first circuit, seeing not only my vehicle but also my character's headpiece visible from different angles as well, put a schoolboy-like smile on my face. See, I remember this being the case from my memories growing up with the game, but there was a part of me that didn't believe this was the case, but seeing it in motion, simply put, it just works. Unfortunately, the game itself is where things stop working so well. Whilst it's very impressive that they pulled off the 3D effect on the system, and it is convincing, it also makes it impossible to be aware of what's in front and behind you. The range of visibility is also incredibly limited, meaning you're going to be driving short stretches of road in eerie lonesomeness, almost like the start of any horror movie. There's no minimap here either, so your only indication of where you are comes from what place you're in and what lap you're on. Even if they couldn't get a minimap to work for technical drawbacks, I don't see why a little place marker like CTRs couldn't have worked here. One of the most important aspects of LEGO Racers' DNA is, as mentioned before, the ability to choose which power-up you want to take. Unfortunately, in the GBC version, they appear at random, and with nary a second to see them exist and make a decision, let alone change your course to pick one up. So you end up attaining power-ups at random, which half of them are extremely situational. The dummy fire cannon red brick one is almost pointless unless you happen to be right behind someone, otherwise you'll just blind fire into the horizon. The blue defense power-up is more like a gamble too, as there's no indication as to when an enemy's attack is coming. You'll be on your merry way, minding your own business, and then suddenly be hit out of nowhere. You don't even get to see the power-up hit you, and for a good chunk of time I thought maybe I was hitting an invisible wall or something. The upgraded red power-up is at least useful because it homes in on other races even if they're out of sight. It's pretty hard to get though, as it requires being lucky enough to hit a red brick, and then hit a white power-up plus brick next before any other. Finally, the green speed brick is, ironically, completely overpowered, and is arguably the only brick worth going out of your way for. Even in its base form, the speed boost you get is incredibly fast, and it pretty much guarantees you to land in first place until you inevitably get hit by another racer's rocket. Should you be lucky enough to get an upgraded speed brick, the race is pretty much in the bag. There's a huge discrepancy between going slow and fast in the game, and if you aren't boasting along, there's a constant feeling of being stuck behind, unable to do anything about your situation unless you find a power-up. Whilst the mechanics are pretty broken, the presentation is at least an improvement, featuring a large variety of backgrounds and roadside scenery for a collection of different themes, as well as the aforementioned 3D effect working surprisingly well inside of its tiny draw distance. The sound design unfortunately really bogs down the whole affair, as you'll be forced to listen to the constant whining of your engine fighting the frequencies of the game's background music, which frequently cuts in and out with all the game's action. Before each circuit, you actually get treated to still image renders taken from the original cutscenes with dialogue, and despite being cheesy by today's standards, at least ropes the experience back in line with what the original game had to offer. There's also a link cable versus mode, which I'm unable to try out for reasons you can probably guess. I'm gonna make a safe assumption and say it plays exactly like the single player circuit in single races, but instead of enemy players being NPCs, they're played by your friends. Other than that, there's really not all that much to say about this version of the game. Whilst it deserves commendation for its genuine efforts to replicate the original experience, I think the whole affair would have been a lot more enjoyable as an actual game had they gone with a format more friendly to the platform, even if it meant cutting those replicated features. A top-down Micro Machines game would have worked really well inside of this design template, for example. With the Switch releasing and providing a large portable library that runs the same code as PC and console games, being direct ports of full-fat experiences as opposed to unique versions, it triggered an interest in me to actually go back and look at the old world of handheld design, and I think LEGO Racers is a particularly intriguing example. I respect the ambition on display in a time when handheld games were severe departures from the game they were based on, a trend that would continue for 20 years or so up until the end of the 3DS. They wanted to get as close as they could to an uncompromised portable experience, and in some ways, I think they got a lot closer than any of us would have ever expected, and that's to be applauded. Thanks so much for sticking around for another retrospective. For those wondering, I've rebranded the retro reviews as retrospectives to sort of highlight their own flavor. Whether you're from the LEGO community, or you didn't know this version existed, or you grew up with this game, please comment below with any stories, memories you have about the game, and remember to like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you want to see similar content, and if you want to take the discussion in a more involved direction, join our Discord in the link below. Until next time, I'll see you guys when I do something else. Bye bye.